Well, Chris, thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
It's been a long time coming. The first time I saw one of your cars was in Santa Barbara, I think in about 2017 at a Cars and Coffee.
Yep.
And I think you know the car I'm talking about. I got off my motorcycle and the parking lot is full of stuff like coach built Ferraris from the 50s, McLarens, a Ford GT, 356s and 911s, and even a 1929 blower Bentley. And there was no one looking at those cars. Everyone was crowded around something that I couldn't see. So I got off my motorcycle, walked over there to see what all the fuss was about, and it was one of your cars.
Wow.
It was one of the Runge Speedsters, the Frankfurt Flyers, as you like to call them.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty early car. You know the car I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was my second customer commission. Yep.
And then the second time I saw one of your cars was in Monterey last summer, the Helios.
Yes.
Which is this gull wing coupe. It is so race inspired. It's weird, Chris, because it's a future past look. You know what I mean? It's vintage, but it's not. It's the future we were promised, but nobody ever delivered on it.
Well, that's really cool. That's very well said. I like that because that's kind of what you're pursuing when you make the cars, you know?
Yeah.
Something like, I always think about this term unfinished business,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like there was just so much good stuff that we missed.
Right.
We weren't given.
That I really appreciate the Helios and a lot of your other builds for that matter, just because of that, because you've taken some retro futurism and you've made it a reality, but also a lot of your cars kind of are firmly planted in a certain era. And we'll get into that. I know you have some very strong inspiration from, post-war German racing cars. When you started, did you ever just take a piece of aluminum that you were working and just throw it across the shop and like maybe utter some obscenities? Like, was it frustrating?
Yeah. There was times of frustration without doubt. I think that experience and that frustration may have come a little bit later on, because in the beginning I was more forgiving of myself because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I'm learning, and you're on this this trajectory of absorbing all the information. The frustration comes when you knew better and you screwed something up and you just knew better for whatever reason, you know, whether you lost focus of what you were doing. That's when you're like, God, why did I let that happen? You know? So that probably came a little later on, I think.
Well, and after all, when you started out, it was really just a hobby, right?
Yep. And I mean, it was like every chance I got, I was in the garage hammering away, but I wasn't planning to do it for anyone other than myself, you know?
What did you do? Did you just kind of start messing around with the English wheel and?
Yeah, well, I had kind of developed a real fascination with the post-war German racers at about 15 years old. My mom and I stopped at a car museum. I had just had knee surgery from snowboarding, and on the way back from the Twin Cities, it's like a 2-hour drive, we stopped at this car museum, and I hobbled around the library and found the book Excellence Was Expected. It's like the original Porsche Bible. And that's where I learned about the Glockler post-war German Eigenbau home-built racers. And to me, in the whole Porsche story, that was one of my favorite parts, because Walter Glockler was really the guy that pushed the boundaries of the Volkswagen engine, set it up mid-engined in very much like a Formula V race chassis, or what would become Formula V later on. And he went out and went racing, and he was really pushing the 356s to their limit. Porsche saw the potential in that. They made a deal with him to put Porsche parts in that car. And one thing led to another. And ultimately, Porsche had the first 550s made by the same coach builder, C.H. Weidenhausen. That's who Glockler had build his cars. And Herman Ramelow was the designer, the engineer behind it. So that story to me was so cool because Porsche relied early on privateers and their feedback, and Bugatti did as well, pre-war Bugattis, on what people were doing with the cars and how they were developing them to make their production cars better. So with that in mind, that's kind of what I had in my head, because they were like built in barns. I found so much beauty in just the raw, hammered out, make it work scrappiness of those cars, you know?
It's exactly the opposite story of Ferrari, right? Ferrari was building competition cars first and foremost, and he only built the road cars to finance the racing, whereas Porsche was trying to race road cars. But then Walter Glockler wanted to make these bespoke competition cars. And I think his cousin was like the driver for their.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have a badge from his cousin's. It's here somewhere. I picked it up somewhere along the way. But yeah, he and his cousin was, I think they were motorcycle racers as well.
Yes.
And then Walter Glockler owned the VW franchise dealership in Frankfurt. And so that's why he had access to all these VW parts and built the first car using VW components.
In preparing for the interview, I was kind of reading about you and your career, and Glockler figured into it. And I learned that Max Hoffman, who was the Porsche distributor on the East Coast of the United States very early, Hoffman got a hold of a Glockler Spider, and then Johnny von Neumann raced that car at Bridgehampton, which is amazing history. And then, of course, von Neumann founded Competition Motors in Los Angeles and was a Porsche dealer here. So
yeah, I believe Hoffman brought over two Glocklers. There's some interesting history. Us being close to Wisconsin and the Frank Lloyd Wright, where Frank Lloyd Wright kind of got his start. There's some history with Glockler, Hoffman, and Frank Lloyd Wright as well. I believe there are photos, a friend of mine has them, of a Glockler in one of Frank Lloyd Wright's studios.
No, it makes perfect sense because Frank Lloyd Wright designed the Hoffman Motors showroom in Manhattan.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah. And I think Hoffman and Wright were fairly close.
Uh-huh.
I have to tell you a little story. A few years ago, I interviewed Wojciech Polak Jr.
Oh, wow.
And we got to talking about Max Hoffman because he was so instrumental in Porsche's rise in the United States in the 1950s. It was Hoffman who persuaded Porsche to build the Speedster as a low-cost model for the U.S. and all of that. And he persuaded Mercedes-Benz to build the 300 SL as a production car after the race cars came out. But Wojciech Polak Jr. told me that he and his father remained close to Max Hoffman up until the end. And I think Hoffman might have died in something like 1980. But he was living in a high-rise condo in Santa Monica, right along the beach. And Wojciech would bring him meals and kind of attend to errands for him because Hoffman was more or less a shut-in at that point. He had lost his automotive empire. All of the German manufacturers that he had represented for so long established their own corporate distribution network in the U.S.
Wow.
When did you put it all together and say, I'm going to build something in this vein?
In 2010 is when I saw that it might be possible. I originally bought I think it was a 1954 Beetle pan. And my plan was to do a Romesh style. I don't know if you're familiar with the Romesh.
Sure.
There's a Romesh Porsche that is at the Prototype Museum in Hamburg, where they sliced the pan and they kind of shifted the overall aesthetic of how the driver would sit in the pan. It's got a longer nose on it. It's a beautiful car. And I was reading the story about that car being unearthed on the Samba. There was a whole thread on it. And when I was reading about that and seeing how they built it, I'd already had the idea that I wanted to try it. And that gave me the visual impact of what could be, and kind of the inspiration. I never really cared for cars that were built on the VW pan, just because of how, and honestly, with the 356s, when you get a low slung coach built body on that, the fan shroud always sticks up too high. And so you have this weird, it's like you have these cool cars. A lot of the VW fiberglass kit cars were made that way. It's like, oh, that looks kind of interesting from the front. And then you get to the back, it's like this big box, you know? And that always drove me nuts. But they really pulled it off with that Romesh. And I just thought it was beautiful. So I started looking into that. And then one thing led to another. And I realized that maybe a Formula V, I looked at the dimensions of the original Spiders and the Glockler, and the Formula V was within like a 1/4 inch all the way around, all four corners. And I started studying Formula V chassis, and the cost of entry is super cheap on those. And I was like, my real interest is in designing this body. I could buy a great running Formula V race car, and if I could find one with a title, that's a bonus, and make that my first build. And that's what I did. I found a Predator Formula V in Virginia for like, I think it was about $2,800 or $3,000, if I remember right. I think it was on eBay, and the auction didn't sell. And I contacted the seller and bought it from him. And that's what I got started with. And it was the perfect platform to build off of, because I was on a shoestring budget, you know, at that point.
Well, and you were learning as you went. So what was the most frustrating thing about like just beginning the metalworking process? Was it the planning? Was it, getting the dimensions right? Was it actually forming the panels?
The most frustrating part early on, I think, was the welding. I didn't know, I knew how to MIG weld steel, and I had done, building rails for skateboarding and snowboarding and a little bit of fabrication on cars that I had over the years. But MIG, I bought a spool gun. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is. Are you? Yeah, I bought a spool gun to MIG weld 50 thousandths aluminum, and it's just almost impossible. I would go an inch at a time, and then it wants to just blow through. But I got it to the point where I could weld an inch and a half, and then move on down the line, weld that. So bringing the body panels together was pretty challenging. In my mind, shaping the metal, it made sense to me along the way as I learned what metal does, what it doesn't want to do. It made sense. Some people, I've done a lot of classes over the years now, and some people just can't wrap their brain around it. So I find different ways to connect their ability to work with how the metal's moving. But it always made sense to me. Metal did. It's still challenging, and it's still a wrestling match at times, but that part wasn't that difficult. It was the welding.
Along the way, you didn't have any formal training, right? I mean, you were just teaching yourself.
No, I did with all the tools. There was a bunch of books.
Oh,
I realized that you don't have to have a ton of expensive tools to really do a high standard of work, So
well, I mean,
that's what I started with.
The Italian masters, and probably some Germans and Englishmen too, would shape panels over a tree stump and a hammer and a tree stump. That's about what you need, So
and that's what I did. We had a giant maple tree go down at my house, and I made a shaping stump out of that. I still have it here in the shop. That's what I use a lot of times. There's certain times wood is very interesting because it doesn't mar up the aluminum, and with a car that we're leaving finished raw, wood is really nice to work with. So that stump has had all kinds of shapes ground into it, depending on what I need that day. I'll come in with a grinder and make a dish or whatever, and you hammer into it. It's a very useful piece of wood in the shop.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch, and it's fascinating to learn about what the metal will do based upon your input and what tools you're using on it.
Absolutely. Um, that's what fascinated me with it so much. And I took a very, very artistic, I still do. It's a bit more science now just because of where we're at as a business. But I've always taken a very artistic approach to the work. There are guys who you'll look at the panel when they lay out their patterns, and it is a mathematical formula. And I see that, I'm like, it makes sense to me, but my brain doesn't really work that way. I shape the bucks by hand, I shape the metal by hand, and it may be a half inch different because when I see it on the car and on the chassis, I don't like how something looks. It needs more crown, or it needs to be taken down in an area. And so I'll go in. Many times I've modified the buck, I've ground it down, sanded it down, to bring things in where to me, they look better. So I take a very artistic approach to the work. My son, who's involved now, is very methodical, and he's both an artist. He does beautiful artistic freestyle work, but he's also very methodical and mathematical. So he has a balance of the two.
What's his name, by the way?
Finn.
And how old is Finn?
He's 21.
Okay. All right. So
Yep.
he's grown up around this, and
yeah, I mean, we homeschooled him and his sister, and so he was in the shop all throughout growing up, primarily making slingshots and things to go fishing, hunting. You know what I mean? Because like I said, we're out in the middle of nowhere, so that was always his passion, was hunting and fishing. But when he turned 16, he went all in on cars, and he hasn't stopped since.
And one of your other inspirations, obviously, has been the super light construction, or superleggera, as the Italians call it. But it's a thin framework, an armature.
Yes.
You lay the panels over that, but you also use a traditional wooden body buck.
Yeah, I've done it both ways. I was making the wooden body bucks, and then I would shape the aluminum tubing over the buck and attach that to the chassis, and then shape the panel work to that, and using the wood buck. But that would stay inside the car, and then I would wrap the panel work, weld it, rivet it, and it would become one with that aluminum tube buck. And then that would be fixtured or fastened to the steel framework underneath as well. And I found that to be a very, it sped things up for me. It was a more efficient way to build. And it combined a couple of different artistic approaches to the design process and the build process that I really enjoyed. So that's been a part of our work. I started my first customer commission with a partial superlight aluminum tube frame, and I realized, wow, this really works well. And so I developed it further and further, and that's pretty much been the standard for most of our builds. Now, like the Viper rebody that we did, there was no wood buck ever for that car. That was all done with tube. I did one half of the car longitudinally, and I made notes on every tube, because by this time I had developed a tool for bending the radiuses. And all of those identifiers that I marked the tubes with correlated with the tooling that I had made. And then Finn came in. He would have been 14 years old. I have pictures of him. And he, without any of my input, he matched every single tube identically and shaped the other half of the car. And then he and I welded it together.
Wow. Fantastic. And that, just so people know, that is you called that car the Veleno?
Yes.
Which means poison or venom in Italian.
Yes.
So yeah, perfect name. And it's an SRT10 Viper chassis and running gear, but with a bespoke Runge body.
Yeah, and interior.
And interior, of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about that car, but I think we should back it up a little bit and talk about your
Yeah.
first customer commission, because how did that even come about? Like, did someone see the FF1 and go, wow, this is awesome, build me one?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I brought the car. I really, like I said, I had no intention of even showing the car. Uh, but I had befriended a couple of the Porsche guys here in Minnesota. And through that, one of them, Lewis, he ran Cars and Coffee in the Twin Cities area. And he saw pictures of the car. And I think he may have even come up and visited my shop. And he said, you got to bring this thing down. People would flip their lids, at Cars and Coffee. So I did that. And it was the car was swarmed all day long. And it was overwhelmed. I did not expect that. Uh, it was really fun. And a guy saw it there, a guy named Jason, and I don't think he asked me at that show. I think that he saw it and he went back home, told his wife about it. He was a big Shelby Cobra fan, loved aluminum bodied cars. And the show after that, which would have been in Oktoberfest, probably October of 2012, that's when he approached me and said, hey, would you build one of these things for me? And at this time, I had a desk job working for a friend's company here in town doing marketing. And I had already built my first car, had no plans to build another one. And, I had a steady paycheck in healthcare and all the things that I had never had before in my life from a normal working job. And I did not like working at that desk at all. So I told my wife, I was like, I wonder if you could actually do this and make a living at it. Jason and I went back and forth and what it would take to build it. I really had no idea, but we came up with a number, and I knew if I could do it in a certain amount of time, I knew what materials cost, and we were going to use the Formula V basis. And I knew that I had a little bit of a cushion to cover the mortgage, and I had a way to buy groceries for a little while. So it took a while. I think it took like 8 months of my wife and I like back and forth, don't do it, do it. And finally she's like, yeah, might as well go for it. See if you can do it. So that's when I pulled the trigger. That would have been 2013, early 2013, I think.
Okay, so that was Frankfurt Flyer 002, right?
Yep. So it was built on the Formula V chassis, very similar bodywork to 001. 001 was monoposto, so it was single seat, dead center. I widened the chassis, so I started doing a lot more fabrication, modified the chassis, suspension, a handful of other things. And I did that down at my uncle's shop. So my uncle lived just a couple miles down the road from our hobby farm. And he kind of guided me through, because like I said, he was the old school hot rodder,
Yeah.
And he gave me a lot of input on how to approach things and how to fixture things, because we had to jig that whole chassis up and fixture it and then cut it apart and widen it for two people, and rework the architecture of it.
Again, old school hot rodders to the rescue.
Yep.
When I look at your early cars, a lot of them are kind of slab sided.
Yes.
They don't tuck under so much, in contrast to your more recent builds. And it always makes me think of cars like the BMW 328 Mille Miglia, which is an enclosed streamlined car, but it's got that slab side.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes me think of the Bizzarini GT, that slab side. Aerodynamically, this is a very efficient shape, that slab side, which you may not have known at the time.
No, I knew what I saw in the books and in my mind aesthetically what would make sense. My uncle and I did put yarn all over 001, and I think we had 3 leaf blowers, if I remember right, because he has a big property and his grandsons help him clean it. So we had 3 leaf blowers aimed at it, watching the yarn, and seeing where the high and low pressure spots were. And yeah, it's an interesting aerodynamic design for sure.
Did that exercise actually help you to kind of reshape and tweak things?
Yeah, so I didn't have the canopy built quite yet. And when I built the canopy, that canopy came in and corrected the low pressure areas to get good steady flow over the whole car.
Interesting. I want to delve into a little bit more of the underlying construction because, of course, the bodies are beautiful, but we're talking about essentially ladder frames and tube frames. And then there are also bulkheads all throughout the car, sort of transverse bulkheads. Some of them are longitudinal, but those then tie into the tube frame that lies just under the skin, right?
Yeah, exactly. So with the first cars, just kept it very simple, working off of the frame rails and coming up, building the bulkheads, and then riveting the bodywork to the aluminum bulkheads. And then there would be framework inside of that as well at times. The fourth car I built was he wanted to do SCCA, just club events with it. And so inside of those bulkheads were additional structural framing, more of not a full on cage, but safety tubing around the cockpit and things like that.
Well, that's awesome that some of your cars have actually been raced.
Yeah, that one was driven hard.
Yeah, I mean,
hard.
That is the true test, right?
Yeah. And that one was what was so cool about that. And I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it was the next one in line, really. Actually, that would have been, let's see, it was the third car. So it was the second customer commission. It was pretty well dedicated to be SCCA, and it utilized the engine that my friend Tom Brook, who was a land speed racer, the engine that he set his first record with in 1967, same formula we used, which was a VW two-piece case. So it's a pre-58 VW case with the Porsche 912 engine that I bought in South Dakota, the guts of that inside of it.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then an Isky 2J cam. And I got to remember here, we put Okrasa heads on it, so dual port heads that were made for the 36 horsepower case.
Original Okrasa heads?
No, they're a reproduction.
Okay. Well, I mean, their original ones are like chicken lips, right? Like, good luck finding any.
Yeah, super rare.
Yeah.
But it's cool that Wolfsburg West is continuing to remake them.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that engine, that's what he raced with. And the cam we put in it was the original cam that Tom set the record with. I was in Tom's basement and he pulled it off the shelf and he's like, it'll still work. And he's old school. His whole thing in his basement, he had this beautiful flow bench, and that was his whole thing, was just getting flow on the heads and the intakes and doing all that work for setting land speed records.
Well, that brings up another topic, which is obviously you are heavily focused on form and shape and styling and the packaging and all that. But then it comes down to power plant and gearbox, transaxle, all that stuff. And obviously the customer wants a certain level of performance.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of the engine building and all of the mechanicals is your hand versus someone else along the way?
Yeah, so I've relied heavily on other people to do the engine work. I'm now more fascinated, and I built my 356 motor for my own 356 over the winter, just this last year. But I relied on Tom. Let's see, he built 2 different motors, Okrasa type motors for me. And then we used John Randolph out in California, who was building a little 2.3 liter for us in a bunch of the builds. Tom also built a couple of 356 motors. So I've leaned heavily on engine builders because I've always kind of considered it just a whole, like, it takes so much effort and so many years to really master that. And I've always thought it was so fun to let other people tell their story. Like Tom's story is incredible. You know, that car that he set the first land speed record with was a speedster that he pulled the 4-cam engine out of and put a 36 horse engine in, you know.
Wow, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
A little
yeah.
wheezy little push rod, 36 horse.
Uh-huh. So those kind of stories, I love that kind of stuff. And with Tom's history, to have him part of the program for those years was really fun. And when he was building those engines, he was in his 80s. I think he's 91 or 92 now. And he's slowing down quite a bit. But I did get to take him out to Jay Leno's with me before he slowed down a lot. We took him out there, and that's, to me, that's what's fun about it. So yeah, with the engines, I've relied on other people. Now, you know, in today's world, we're developing, designing our own engines from the ground up, and still using other teams and engineers and engine builders. But I have a lot more input, way more input.
But how cool is it to have had that relationship with Tom and learned from his experience and utilized his talents? Because guys like that are, I mean, as you say, they're getting old. There's not that many of them left.
No, there really isn't. And, you know, it's so interesting with Tom. He was inducted into the Land Speed Racing Hall of Fame. He always gravitated towards things that people would never even consider. He built a 3-cylinder 914-6, so a 911 6-cylinder engine, only using 3 cylinders on one bank, and the other bank was counterweighted. And he went for a land speed record with that. It's just fascinating. That old school ingenuity is what I love. I love the scrappy nature of it. That's kind of how I was raised, because my mom and dad had nothing when they got started, and I watched them work their way, you know, fix up an old farmhouse and make everything they could, just make it better and better. And that's kind of the approach that Tom takes with his engine building. And now I think it's good to possess that, because when it comes down to it, you got to make something happen if everything's not going right. Now we're in such a different place where the engines we're developing, we're using crazy software to run tests on them and get all sorts of data before they're even built. And it's a whole different world, you know?
Yeah, and I want to get into some of the engine design and stuff, because you have a very exciting flat 8-cylinder that I want to talk about. And I see that you've got one right behind you in the shop there.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned software, because getting back to the coach building, you've never been a CAD guy. You've always sketched, right? And cut paper templates and laid them over the frame. And are you averse to CAD in that regard? Or is it just like you just don't feel like you need it?
I was averse to it for a while and did everything the old school way. The only thing that I really got into, or I shouldn't say really got into, but the only thing that I really used would be Photoshop to like overlay roof designs. And that was helpful for me and my customers to get a visual of what something could look like. But I still to this day don't use CAD. Now, the big change that has taken place in our shop in October, November of 2024, with my son coming in full time, and then my friend Jeff, who does our CNC milling for like door handles, badges, things like that. Jeff ended up teaching my son Finn CAD, teaching him how to use Fusion 360, and we got a 3D printer. I think that's kind of how it started. So we could do more rapid prototyping. And immediately, and Jeff had done some 3D printing for me with door handles and different things that I needed for test fit. And I saw the value in that. And I realized this is very helpful. Now, Finn is working on CAD every day. My old designs, he has entered into CAD. He's designed our new chassis in CAD. Customer designs, he all in CAD, and that's been a big shift for us. So he can design. Obviously, a lot of guys know this, maybe some don't, but the wood bucks, the tube bucks, it's all in CAD. And I've got a 3D printed model of the car that I just shaped that he entered into CAD and surfaced it for me as a guide.
Well, how
And
exciting is it to see it come together quickly in a 3D print, right?
yeah, it is super helpful.
One of the things I've always admired about your cars is the imperfection of them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of your cars, I've noticed there are slight variations left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's intentional or not, it is in keeping with the coach building tradition, because even, the master coach builders of Italy, you will see those slight imperfections. And
Yeah, it's there's still this balance that you have to strike, and so you have to stay true to yourself and your own convictions within the work and the artistry, uh, and you have to please the customer. And so, yeah, there's always this balance though, and it's a fun path to be on. Um, I think in the future, just because of the precision that we're able to accomplish, the cars will become more and more consistent. Templates, patterns, everything gets better. Where I was, back 3 years ago, just freestyling, drawing stuff out. Things are just getting a lot more precise now than they've ever been, and that just makes the finished product that much better. I don't even know if I would call it better, but I would just say more accurate.
sure. Yeah.
Because I love the imperfections. That's what I fell in love with, and that's why I left. The first two cars were painted, and then they've all been left raw after that.
I think your cars look best in the raw.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let's take the Helios, for example. It looks much more mature as a finished product.
I agree. It's Finn did the tube buck on that one. He shaped the tube buck, and he took some own personal creative freedom in it, and what he thought looked better, lowering the hood down. It gave deeper draws on the front fenders. I think he helped shape a few panels, but I shaped the majority of the panels on that car. I would agree the workmanship, or maybe not even the workmanship, but the finish on the car is much more refined than previous cars. And you learn as you're doing this, like the struggles in that car where I would face some very large challenges in the past with those deep draws and those reverses. On the Helios, I had no problem. Like, it just came to me so easily. And that, I mean, I'm not like patting myself on the back, but you just learn so much over the years, that those panels that would normally be challenging, they're pleasant to shape when you get to a certain point.
I can imagine the view out of the windscreen where the hood drops down, the fenders swoop up. I bet it's an incredible front view from the driver's position, or the passenger for that matter.
Yeah, it is really unique. You just see just the crown of the front left and right fender. The hood pretty much disappears, and it's really a great car.
By the way, who did you sell that car to?
That was commissioned by Gary Oldman.
I thought so. Okay. So Gary Oldman, the incomparable English actor. I mean,
Sir Gary Oldman.
Yes, Sir Gary Oldman. I didn't know he was a car guy.
Yeah, he is. Always has been. And he's so much fun to work with. He's become a dear friend of ours, and Finn and I enjoyed working with him immensely. And he's had some pretty cool cars and some fun stories with the cars that he's had.
What was the process like with Gary planning this car out, like conceiving the car?
He saw a story that was published on my work. He said he was just oohing and eyeing over the car, and it was the RS Coupe, like what he commissioned. And his wife said, "What is it? What are you looking at?" And he showed her, and she said, "Well, you should order one for your birthday coming up." And he never does anything like that for himself. She said, "You got to do something for yourself like that." So he emailed me, and we got on the phone. And this is probably terrible. I had no idea who he was. I don't watch a lot of TV or movies. After the fact, I realized, but had a great conversation with him, and I, you can tell if somebody's the right type of person for your work and for what we build. And I felt really great about working with him, and I think he obviously did as well. And so we got the ball rolling. We went back and forth on design ideas, and so throughout the process, it's a multi-year process where you're communicating. But that's what we do. We would go back and forth and get the details worked out, and it was a lot of fun.
I'm sure. If you could go back to Chris Runge in 1991 and say, before this is over, you're going to be taking one of your own hand-built cars to thermal with Gary Oldman. I mean, can you imagine?
Oh my gosh. No, not at all. It's hard to even register that. Yeah, 1991, I was interested in building skateboard ramps. I loved cars, loved hot rods and stuff, but yeah, I would have never thought.
It's such an awesome story. I mean, God, I admire what you do so well. And by the way, you don't have a lot of electronics in the cars, although the more recent engines you've needed to bring the electronics in, right?
Yes. So up until the R2, which was the flat six powered kind of spaceship looking car, that car used ITBs, Motec management. So it had a lot more electrical. That's the furthest we'd gone with electrical gizmos until the new engine that's sitting behind me here, which is that is a deep dive into the electronics. The ECU that we're using is it's crazy how deep you can go into that ECU. Things that you should not be able to adjust, you can adjust in that ECU.
All right, well, let's talk about some of these engines. I know that you had an early flat four that was 2.4 liters.
Yeah. So in 2016, there's a couple different parts of this story. In 2016, I started talking with Dean Palopoulos, who builds the Polo 911-4. Dean and Chuck Beck of Beck Spider fame, both, I believe it was in the early, maybe mid 80s, around the same time, had the idea to take a Porsche 6-cylinder 911 engine and remove the two center cylinders and shorten the case. And they both did this, starting by welding the case, modifying crank, modifying all the internals to make it a 4-cylinder 911. And it proved to be, both of them successfully did it, proved to be a very robust little engine. I think Chuck did a total of 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken. And I had the opportunity to buy his first one. I didn't, but an acquaintance of mine has it in his car, and it's awesome. But Chuck didn't pursue it any further, to my knowledge. Dean did, and he made a business of this, and he started casting his own cases, the Polo 911-4, and has built, I don't know, I think he told me it was somewhere around, I want to say it was around 100. I don't know for sure, of those engines over the years. So he and I started talking in 2016 about using his engines. And that's for me, that was a huge price leap. And I made sales brochures and flyers and online, put the word out that we wanted to work with him and do these engines. We didn't get anyone to bite right away. Around that same time, I had an inquiry to do a flat 8 from a doctor in Texas. And so Phil Schweitzer, who was working for me at the time, Phil and I started exploring designing a flat 8. We were looking at places in Brazil to do it, and ultimately that project never came to fruition either. But the individual who's interested, he might actually buy the current version of it now. He's still very interested in. But that's kind of where we got the ball rolling with these 2 different types of engines. Um, in 2020, let's see, 2023, I had a customer come on board, and we started talking about the 911-4, and he pulled the trigger on having Dean build us one. So that was our first twin plug 2.4 liter. And that's in the car that I'm just finishing now, and it's a sweet engine. After that, I started exploring what is possible with this engine. You know, do you turbocharge it? And I know Rod Emery has used Dean's engines in a bunch of his cars, and now Rod has gone on to further develop that engine with some more modifications to make it even better. So I was trying to figure out what could we do with this engine, and in that research, I got connected with an engine builder in Chicago, Saul Snyderman. And Saul and I put our heads together, and we started chatting about the Tuttle car that achieves these crazy RPMs, you know, and what on earth are they using for their top end? And through a series of conversations, we realized that maybe we could contact the company that made those and have them look at making us a version for the 911-4. And so that's how we got started with that. And I went to work with them, negotiating, and got them to give us, design us these 4-cylinder heads, cam chests, and top end essentially, and make them exclusive for Runge cars. And we are selling those to the public as well. But that's what we did. We developed that for the 911-4, and then we started working with Jim Torres, who's kind of the mastermind behind the 935 flat fans that are used on a lot of the 911 race cars. And the next thing we know, 2 years later, we have this package that's finally come together, and we were just able to finish up the initial wiring of that 4-cylinder over the last week and get it running. And I don't know if you've seen the videos. It is bonkers. It is a little monster, is what I call it.
Yeah, it is. It's really impressive. And that's Swindon Powertrain that you're working with in the UK, right?
That is. Yep.
Shout out to them. And Richard Tuttle, amazing stuff coming out of their shops.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He is a hero of mine.
Yeah, incredible. So now this flat 8, it's 4-cam, 32 valve, 5.5 liters, 5.
Yeah, 5.3 liter. The first 3 are spec'd at 5.3 liters. Very similar to the 4-cylinder that we did. Peak power at 8,600 RPM, and we have loose figures right now. The 4-cylinder is slated. We're aiming for 300 horsepower at 8,600 RPM, 9,200 RPM red line, 10,000 RPM over rev limit. The flat 8, we're aiming for 600 horsepower at 5.3 liters, 8,600 RPM, 9,200 red line, and 10,000 over rev limit.
But in the cars that you build, that is more than enough. Like, your cars are, again, super light, right? That's
yes.
You still hold to that standard.
Yeah, it is going to be absolutely bonkers. And like I said, we've redesigned, re-engineered our chassis, our suspension. I don't know if you can see it behind me. We've got the transaxle that will go with the flat 8. It's been rebuilt and re-geared by Bill Rader in Las Vegas. He builds a great transmission. So, but with the re-engineering of the chassis, Finn redesigned it, and we sent it off to TJ Russell. Russell built. He does the Baja 911s, and TJ and his team ran it through FEA testing to look at what works, what doesn't work, and they gave us great feedback. Finn and Jeff, who helps out here in the shop, designed our uprights, custom milled, CNC milled uprights. Again, those were run through FEA testing. So, man, over the past 3 years, a lot has gone into this to make it happen. And now the engine, I just got pictures of the first casting of the case halves, and our crank is just now being machined. So we have parts coming in to be assembled over the next few weeks.
And you mentioned you're just finishing up a car right now. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that car?
The car I'm finishing now was actually, the chassis started just outside of Detroit, being built by a Porsche restorer named Ted Dunham. And Ted had Porsche 718 chassis 057 in his shop undergoing restoration. It's an RS60, originally a factory car. Ted got the permission of the owner at the time to blueprint the chassis and build a second one. He started doing that, and Ted's son, Jim, who is an incredible engineer, worked at Ford on the GT program for a long time. Ted and Jim designed their own rear suspension for this chassis and kind of evolved it into something really special. They designed it to have a flat six engine, and Ted dreamed of having an aluminum body on it, but the cost was out of budget for him. So he planned to modify a 550 Spider fiberglass body and fit it to it. Ted ended up getting ill and passed away and wasn't able to finish the project. So through a chain of events, the chassis and all the components ended up here, and amazing, amazing boxes of parts, date matched drums, all drilled out, lightened B drums, Les Leston leather straps that I've never even seen before. Now the grandson of Les Leston has taken over the company, so I sent him full dimensions of the straps so he can continue making them, because he didn't have the design for them. But tons of bits that came with this package. And so it came to my shop. It sat here for about 2 years, and a gentleman was coming through on a shop tour, and I started talking to him about it. And he was the one who said, we gotta carry on Ted's dream. We got to bring it to life. And he said, I want Finn to do it. As much as Finn wants to be involved, I want Finn to do it. And it was like a goosebump moment, So that's the car that Finn then blueprinted that chassis, put it into CAD, redeveloped it for the flat 8. And Jim, who is Ted's son, I've been sending him pictures the whole time of this process, and he's so excited about it, to see what Finn's doing, see what I'm doing, and also see his dad's car coming to life. So it now has a Polo, the 2.4 liter Polo twin plug engine. So it's probably around 190 to 200 horsepower. It has our flat fan. It's the very first flat fan on one of those engines. It's got a little bit of Abarth GTL in the rear shape. The nose has a little bit of 718, but also the Type 645. That's the Mickey Mouse car, the Miracle of Avis, the car that flew off the bank. It's got some of that shape in the nose. It's gorgeous. It's different from anything we've ever built. And I'm looking at it off in the distance here from where I'm sitting. It's just beautiful. I love it. And I'm so proud of Finn. The other cool thing about it is that, so Finn put the chassis into CAD, but he also built that whole tube buck from scratch, by eye, no plywood, no hard materials. He just shaped the tubes and welded them up. And then I got him a 3D scanner, so he 3D scanned it and learned Fusion, and he modeled it in Fusion. So that was really a pivotal car for us, going from the old school way to new school design and technology.
I cannot wait to see it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You haven't released any photos of it or anything yet, have you?
No, I don't think I've posted anything other than just in like the Instagram stories or things like that where it disappears after a day. We haven't posted any official, hey, start to finish, this is it. But I have some great materials to tell the car's story that I'll probably be putting together in the next month or so.
Good. I'm going to watch for that. Can't tell you how much I admire what you do, Chris. Chris Runge, You can find more at rungecars.com or your Christopher Runge on Instagram.
Yep, and Runge Cars on YouTube as well.
Perfect. And also, people have to, if they haven't seen it, they've got to check out your videos with Jay Leno on Jay Leno's Garage on YouTube. Chris Runge, man, it's been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Maurice. It's been an absolute pleasure for me as well, and I look forward to the next time.